with our revamped and revitalized look on how to play each of the elements and empires of Aether, this video is going to look at the Magma Nation, the other nation that utilizes volcanoes, but in a totally different way. Volcanoes generate the Magma Nation free units, so you almost never have to actually pay for your military. And as you progress and advance into the late game, you're getting more and more and more units, to the point where you don't even need food or building materials. And so all of those resources can be utilized to capitalize on other efforts elsewhere on the board. You are a mid to late game nation, however, you do find some vulnerabilities to some early game aggression. But either way, the enemy is going to find it very difficult to deflect your massive volcano armies in the late game. Let's take a look at all of their other abilities and how the Magma Nation approaches the board. Here we are taking a look at the Magma abilities, and Magma I think is one of the most interesting elements in the game because it has so many counter abilities depending on what your opponent's matchups are. It's very flexible in its turn position as well. However, it does want to lean more towards the 16-16 and 20-20 position. I do like it there though. I like being able to have really expensive turn ones and set up a really powerful economy, because you can see as we've got more tier 3s than really most elements in the game, we're leaning towards a late game nation. However, there is a secondary build for this element that we have coined Magro that is really good at disrupting the heavily aggro elements and kind of slides right behind them. So it can counter the heavily aggressive elements and actually use your own aggression to take them down. And so taking a look at some of their main abilities and their main key points on the cards is they get a lot of building material production from volcanoes, and we don't need that much food, and so we're usually pretty flushed with food with this because our volcanoes are generating our military. In tier 1, for each volcano that we have, we get a free soldier for it, and it starts on that volcano, yes, and so that means we want to get as many volcanoes as possible. And so the ways that we facilitate this in tier 1 are with a couple of options here. You have your guaranteed free volcano, which this is really hard to ignore because it's just so much value in turn 1. But for prolonged value, Pompeii, more like Pompeii, we can pay resources to get additional volcanoes on top of that, but the cost goes up for every volcano that we already have. And so if you're wanting to combine these two, which most people tend to do, then the ideal sweet spot to pop volcano from nothing is really after the second volcano is purchased via Pompeii, more like Pompeii. That's sometimes difficult to do in really aggressive matchups if you're going for a more late game build. And so if you're starting 2020, then there's an opportunity for you to Pompeii, more like Pompeii, your first volcano for 4-4, and then maybe volcano for nothing and get 2 volcanoes right out of the gate. That's a really powerful open. You're getting soldiers to contend with early aggression and expand upon the board, and getting a lot of really good resources. On top of that, you've got good defensive starts, liquid hot magma if someone is going to be really aggressive on you, like lightning, something like that. But we've also got great economic starts. Magma is this beautiful mix where you get to pick how late are we going to go. Are we going to go for a full late game, perhaps a 50-50 and quest type victory, or are we going to take the fight to our enemies at some point? And so rapid colonization is really good if we're starting 10-10 or 13-13. We've got like a rainforest next to our capital. We can get a really powerful tile for a cheap price. Hot spring is going to primarily allow us to convert a swamp tile into a hot spring, but a really good food tile that we can produce, only we can create. And then overflow ideally is put on a rainforest or a hot spring to get just a ton of resources out of our opening corner. And so if we see good combinations for hot spring and overflow, then it's kind of tough to ignore. However, I would usually reserve that for earlier turn nations, 10-10, 13-13, because 16-16 and 20-20, you typically have to play pretty defensively now because players are figuring out that they can actually go at those later turn nations, because eventually going earlier in the turn is your advantage. And so if I'm looking at these cards, I would say the standard 3 that I see most of the time is probably these 3, but it's kind of hard to argue with a guaranteed half-price tile, but this all depends on what is actually in your corner. Magma is really good with poor corners. If you've got a few swamps or deserts in your corner, and of course poison or sand is banned as a result, Magma is really good because they can always convert their tiles into tiles that benefit them, like these volcanoes or these hot springs, and so it's really solid for you. But then we get into tier 2, which is where Magma gets really fun. And so cards that we're typically going to see is with each tier, we can take cards that will make that many soldiers pop out of each of our volcanoes. And so tier 2, it would spawn 2 soldiers. Tier 3, you guess it, there is 3 soldiers spawning, and that's for every volcano. So if you've got 2 volcanoes or 10 volcanoes, it doesn't matter. It's spawning that many soldiers. So Magma's not too bad at getting the 10 army win condition as well. So it's kind of hard to not take these abilities. However, let's see where we can kind of deviate from this. The new counter to fire is Pyroclastic Vents, and I personally love this card. It is a card explicitly built to counter fire. You can teleport from one volcano tile to another volcano, no matter who the owner is. So you can teleport right to that secondary succession volcano as the Fire Nation and counter them out. And so this is why when you see fire picked at 2020, Magma is a great 16-16 pick because you're always going to be able to keep this in your back pocket. But, of course, depends on the situation. But it's not bad for making a volcano in enemy territory and always being able to teleport to it later. And, of course, you've got weather events that can spawn other volcanoes as well. And then we get into our Glacier matchup, where we can melt 2 Blizzard tiles, just like Fire has as well. So that one, of course, is matchup dependent. If Glacier's not on the board, you're not taking that one. And then we also get into the more of the Magro build here. And so what we're looking at here is San Andreas did it is in Tier 2, when a battle involving our general is won, we get a volcano and 2 defensive fortifications on it. So we're going more aggressive. We're utilizing our food that we've got a little bit of extra of because we didn't have to spend any on soldiers, and we've got some additional soldiers with that, and we can win a fight against a more mid to late game nation, but the aggro nations is kind of hard to do. But they're also going to find it very difficult to attack us because at the beginning of the game, volcanoes add to our defensive dice rolls. So they're going to find it difficult to swing into our volcanoes, but that's what this card is for. Raked over the coals. Our defense becomes our offense, and so we flip the switch and we become an offensive nation, and then usually these aggro nations have no defensive dice roll bonuses, and we can just attack straight into them and proc San Andreas did it and get that volcano in their territory where maybe we have Pyroclastic Vents on the backside as well. It might not even have to be a fire matchup. And so this is a really, really good Magro Tier 2 build. But we're progressing towards Tier 3, which I would say primarily you're typically going for your quest, which is to own 5 volcano tiles. But a Magro build is typically going to go for a militaristic win, and so we've got other abilities for that as well. You've got Krakatoa, which is going to turn as many volcanoes as you would like, but add a lot of attack to your general. Now, this is typically going to be used to finish off the final boss or perhaps to finish off an opponent for you here. But drop the Basalt. Our general can teleport from one owned volcano to another freely, and additionally can always teleport to any defense we are involved in. So we can teleport to a defense if we win it. Then the following turn, we've got Krakatoa at our disposal. We've got great flipping the tables capability there, but that's more of an aggressive militaristic build. On top of that, we've got Widespread Eruption, which is going to eliminate a massive threat for us. If it's 3 tiles away from a volcano, eliminate the structures and units. So it's just a nuke ability on that tile. We've also got convert 2 of our own tiles to volcanoes. I like this when we're not taking Pompeii. We take volcano from nothing pretty early on. We've got a great economy. We get 2 more volcanoes out of the gate, especially when we've got newer abilities such as San Andreas did it and our new monument. There's a lot more volcanoes to be had with this Magma build, and so big volcanoes is certainly more viable. And so fun stuff here. The only downside to this is if you're going to take big volcanoes, you can't actually go for the quest here. And so it does require you to make some sacrifices, but when you've got several of these volcanoes that are turning out 3 soldiers a turn here, maybe you don't need to actually use your quest or defeat an opponent's capital in order to win the game. You're going for a 50-50 resource turn, 2 bosses, or perhaps even 3 star tiles, or 10 armies. So those are your Magma abilities, and really, you can't go wrong with any of these. I know I didn't mention all of them, but you've got abilities that restrict opponents' resources, to just really make sure that you're going to follow through on your invasion and get the dub there. But yeah, that's Magma. Really powerful stuff.